Hello, I'm Hyun Park, and welcome to This Week in Enterprise Tech. For a change, Charlie Araujo is not here this week. He is on a well-deserved vacation after 15 weeks of coverage. So here I am alone, and I'm here to cover 8 quick topics that I've noticed. Among other things, last week was a big week for shows with Snowflake Summit, Cisco Live, SAP Sapphire, Zoho Zoholics, as well as Qlik World. 5 big enterprise software companies making their stance, as well as there were some acquisitions out there too, such as Cloudera made an acquisition out there, and there were some funding announcements that were pretty big as well. So each of these shows, I felt like asked a specific question that was interesting to the AI world and for the CIO office. The first one, let's get right into it. Let's look at Snowflake Summit, which I was at over in San Francisco. And of course, the case they were trying to make is whether Snowflake was truly an AI platform. So is Snowflake truly an AI platform now? Well, for starters, they obviously have their new CEO from their Neva acquisition and formerly from Google, who has a very strong AI background. They have deepened their AI operationalization capabilities, as well as their modeling support. And they made 200 plus announcements, which I would recommend looking at depending on your functional interest in Snowflake. And one of the things I found most interesting is that they have a specific type of language that they use to describe each of their phases of launch. They have a private preview, which obviously means a limited preview for a certain number of users. They have a public preview, which allows all of their customers to be able to access this technology to some capability. And then they have a generally available, a GA phase, which is obviously the product being able to be offered for everybody on a public basis. And then they use this term soon. For Snowflake, this actually has a specific meaning. For them, soon is a goal of having something out within 60 days. So soon is not just kind of a vague marketecture word to make you think that something's going to come out only to see it not happen. Snowflake is very focused on getting things out in this day and age, knowing that they have to compete on the AI side. So obviously, Snowflake has struggled to be called an AI platform in the past because there have been some issues around that have been brought up around how deep Snowflake actually goes in AI. Do they have a deep ecosystem integration? Do they actually go into your world of data that goes beyond Snowflake? Snowflake has often been seen as a company that insisted on having everything built right here. But if you look at some of the recent announcements, you can see, for instance, their Snowflake Cortex analyst in search to build bots, which included an on-stage demo at Snowflake Summit, where a random user brought from the audience was able to build a bot in a matter of seconds, which was a really good demo, quite frankly. That is for a capability that is in public preview soon, meaning that every Snowflake customer should be able to use this by the end of the summer. We also saw recently Snowflake announce Arctic, their mixture of experts LLM, their custom LLM that is built to support use cases in the enterprise while being efficient from an energy perspective. They also announced Snowflake AI and ML Studio in private preview, so for a limited audience at this point in preview to be able to build AI capabilities. And they also announced a Snowflake model registry, which is now in general adoption, generally available. They also announced a Polaris catalog as a vendor-neutral data catalog that is open source, which shows a greater focus on openness compared to the past. Of course, Snowflake has also talked about their use of Iceberg from a data lake perspective. And they also talked about their ability to build customized AI data applications in Snowflake associated with the NVIDIA NeMo Retriever microservices. So NVIDIA wants to be an AI software company. Snowflake says, hey, let's help. Let's help you out because we've got a lot of data. And frankly, we've got to get into AI more deeply. Put all this together. And can you say that Snowflake is an AI platform at this point? I think, honestly, at this point, yes. Snowflake has to be seen as a real AI platform. They put in the work, whereas a couple years ago, frankly, Snowflake wanted to be seen as an AI platform and didn't quite have all the tools and toys in place to be able to support the combination of machine learning, AI model building, and now LLM support and model support to be able to actually say that they do AI. But at this point, it's going to be very interesting to see what Snowflake customers do now that they do have all of these AI capabilities that are in-house, in platform, and at various stages of private preview, public preview, and GA, with the goal of basically having this all ready for you by the end of the year. So very interesting piece of the puzzle. On a related note, there was an acquisition made by Cloudera, another large data store company that actually owns 25% of the world's data under management. They've been pretty quiet about it. Of course, they were the big company back in the day, back in the era of Hadoop. And in doing so, they managed to get an incredible amount of data that they support on a very governed and restricted and IT-friendly basis. And that's an important piece of the puzzle for AI because it means they have a lot of trusted data that can be used from a training perspective as well as from a tuning perspective. And now they've acquired Verta, which provides data science and machine learning support at high velocity. So basically meaning they're going to be supporting model development and to be packaged and delivered with CI/CD, DevOps support, monitoring capabilities, all the things you want to actually have a mature model in deployment. So that combination of the Cloudera with 25% of the world's data, along with this capability to turn all of that into models that can be operationalized and turned into applications, is going to be a very interesting combination as well. So Cloudera didn't have an event, but still had a great week. Another big show that happened this week was Cisco Live, where they brought up a lot about full stack observability, of course, associated with their acquisition of Splunk. So what does full stack observability really mean for the CIO? It's really easy to get bogged down in the details, but from my perspective, I think it's really important to think about full stack observability for visibility across the IT in 8 different categories, really. We've got to think about applications, microservices, hybrid infrastructure / hybrid cloud, storage, networks, logs, security, and AI. And across those 8 areas, when you think about applications, we're talking about application performance management, where you're tracking user requests, looking at user interactions, you're doing simulations to find performance issues, good old APM. But going a little bit deeper, we're increasingly seeing the need for microservices and container-based monitoring, where you're going to be looking at request rates, error rates, service latencies, and being able to see and having a better idea of where we can move these microservices around potentially to be able to get better performance, whether that be cloud or a server or what have you from a resource perspective. Number 3, around hybrid infrastructure monitoring, we're thinking about the health and performance of servers, virtual machines, containers, cloud resources, all the things that we talk about with hybrid multi-cloud, which has traditionally been a buzzword, but is increasingly a very real combination of servers, data centers, private cloud, and a variety of public clouds now that it is possible and probable that you will be looking at probably a primary cloud of Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, perhaps Oracle, and then you may have secondary cloud to support some specific capabilities. So now that hybrid infrastructure monitoring is an important piece of the puzzle. Next up, we're looking at storage monitoring, where we're looking at IOPS, throughput, latency, capacity, data integrity, and high availability. Obviously, storage, I feel like it gets short shrift in the AI space because we are creating an incredible amount of data, and that data needs to be prioritized correctly based on how accessible it needs to be and what the compliance and governance issues are around that storage. And right now, I feel like that is being ignored just a little bit because the concept of controlling the model is such a big challenge right now. But I think storage is a big piece of the puzzle. Next, looking at network monitoring, you've got to look at latency, bandwidth, packet loss, and tracking performance across the hybrid multi-cloud networks. Obviously, if you can't get your data from here to there, as we say in Boston, that's going to be an issue for you always. Next up, log management, where you have to have centralized logs, correlate activity with performance metrics, and identify the issues associated with root causes. That's always going to be an issue. Seventh, looking at security monitoring. So SIEM, Security Information and Event Management, as well as UEBA, User and Entity Behavior Analytics. Obviously, you're going to want to be able to look at that data to detect threats, monitor behavior. We have a lot of bad actors right now. We have a lot of, frankly, poorly educated users when it comes to data security, as we've been seeing with recent breaches of large platforms across the board. Unfortunately, we live in an era where even the biggest vendors and the biggest platforms can be potentially broken, and you have to have a backup plan that takes into account and assumes that any of your important data could possibly be broken into unless it is completely encrypted and air gapped and separate from the rest of the world, which is not where most of our data is. And then finally, the last piece of this idea of full stack observability is AI and ML monitoring, AI and machine learning. So looking at model performance, pipeline efficiency, accuracy, drift, variance, resource usage, data processing. We are going to be thinking about our models the same way that we look at applications, but APM and models are going to be a little bit different because models are always going to be a little bit more variable in their behavior. And right now we are seeing so much in terms of innovation in the LLM space, large language model space, that it's honestly difficult to figure out exactly how much power and performance and other issues like that are connected. But you've got to be able to see all that. So I think when Cisco is talking about full stack observability, although Splunk has almost all of that, the extent to which they are interconnected at this point is still kind of shaky. I say only because that's shaky across all of IT. And this idea of full stack visibility and observability is extremely important, and one that IT has to get nailed over the next few years if we are really going to take AI seriously as that next generation of IT. So I think it's great that Cisco's talking about it, but they are taking on a whole lot. And frankly, it's not well connected at this point, not well enough to be able to talk about this in a holistic and strategic way from the CIO perspective. So big warning there, and just something to think about for right now. Next show I wanted to move on to was SAP Sapphire, obviously another venerable application show, and obviously one dealing with a lot of change, with Hasso Plattner finally stepping down. Wow, we are seeing the end of this generation of tech CEOs, and it's really surprising to see just how SAP is going. But I think what got my attention the most was their WalkMe acquisition, because it brings up the question of whether SAP is surprisingly becoming easier to use. WalkMe really focuses on providing the best next step from a process perspective and for walking you through how to use an application, which is definitely something you need to use in SAP if you are going across modules and are not familiar with the entire portfolio. And I think that's going to be very helpful in increasing the adoption of SAP in areas where SAP may be seeing people look for other SaaS solutions. We know that SaaS proliferation is definitely massive. The average multi-billion-dollar enterprise now uses over 1,000 applications that is supported over their network and have to have some sort of security policy or governance associated with it. And honestly, I expect this to continue growing. Although companies are trying to reduce the number of apps they have and increase the use of platforms such as SAP, we are also seeing this rise in agentic AI, meaning AI agents, and those agents are going to be used as apps. And I believe it's very possible that 1,000 app, if you include AI agents, is going to double over the next 3 years. So that means growing basically 24, 25% a year in CAGR, if that's how you want to think about it, compound annual growth. But anyways, the big issue there is that this means it's going to be harder and harder to figure out, how do I walk through this app when I have a gazillion apps to think about? So WalkMe is an important piece of that puzzle. But SAP has also made a couple of other acquisitions already, one being LeanIX for IT enterprise architecture, as well as Signavio for their process transformation and automation. And this is actually an important piece of the puzzle because I was an SAP user back in the day. And although I found it to be logical, I realized that it didn't always provide the end user capabilities and user interface that the normal human being would have liked. Let's just put it that way. It was very data oriented, and it's fantastic if you think in terms of data and schema. Maybe a little bit more challenging if you think about usability from a more visual and qualitative perspective. So SAP has definitely made some very important investments between WalkMe, LeanIX, and Signavio to be able to support the average user. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. Because part of what I think will happen is that as there's increased adoption, the performance will be more important. And this will finally drive some of that HANA deployment that SAP has always wanted, because that performance is an important piece of the puzzle for making SAP easier to use and to provide smarter answers for the rest of the AI capabilities that SAP is trying to bring to market as well. An additional show that I was thinking about is Zoho Zoholics. So I was down in Austin last week. I got to meet with the Zoho team. It's always very interesting to talk to Zoho because they talk about topics like transnational localism, where they are focused on working in, call it, underserved or underrepresented tech areas within a country. So for instance, when Zoho comes to the United States, they're not necessarily trying to go deep into Silicon Valley. They were out in Pleasanton, California. They're in Austin, Texas. They're in McAllen, Texas, which is near the Rio Grande, right down at the border. But what I'm more interested specifically from Zoholics is that there is a lot of focus on security and governance. And it makes me wonder if there's space in the enterprise for a secure app suite focused on securing and managing data access. One of the things that I feel makes Zoho different from the vast majority of enterprise applications is the depth of data security and data governance that Zoholics has. They've gone so far as to create their own browser, ULA, ULAA. Go try it out. Chromium-based browser that's very secure. That because they felt that existing commercial tools lacked the level of data governance and security that they were looking for. Zoho, by nature, is an opt-in culture. Where you have to opt in to have your data used in any way for anything that they might be trying to do. Otherwise, it is assumed that you are opt out and trying to keep your data secure and secret to yourselves, because you deserve that level of privacy, both as a human and as a company. So it's interesting to see that of the major software companies out there, probably Zoho, Microsoft, and maybe you could say Google stand alone in the combination of collaboration, apps, analytics. Zoho now has 55 apps that they support and 15,000 employees. So across all that, Zoho stands out in a lot of ways, but their focus on security, I think, might be this hidden Trojan horse of sorts of a way to get into the enterprise above and beyond their app suite that now goes across finance, CRM, analytics, AI, security, and all these other areas that are far beyond the CRM product that they were originally best known for. But that's not all, because there were other shows last week. Okay, so Qlik World also happened last week. Qlik, the analytics company that pushed the future of analytics along with Tableau for much of the 2010s. They made two big announcements last week as well. One around the Talend Cloud. So Qlik acquired Talend a while ago for ETL and data management and announced that the Talend Cloud is now available. And they announced Qlik Answers, which honestly, natural language answers is an announcement that has been made by practically every business intelligence and analytics company, including Zoho, including Tableau, in shows that we've talked about in the past, back when Charlie's in-house, and as he will be next week again. But you know, here's the real question: in 2024, does a talent ETL cloud, extract, transfer, and load cloud, or a Qlik Answer solution even stand out in the analytics market anymore? Because let's be honest, just to name a couple of other announcements we've talked about over the past few weeks, Informatica has just spent years on talking about cloud migration. They have a very mature process that vendors should frankly be ripping off. Informatic has this multi-stage capability of moving people to the cloud, first starting by moving to the cloud and keeping all of your on-prem capabilities in place, and then moving gradually into the cloud in stages of maturity that allow the users or the companies to go at their own pace. And this gradual process has led to a lot of adoption that Wall Street finally picked up on and led to basically the doubling of their stock, which was frankly overdue based on what I know as an MBA, but whatever, Wall Street analysts are going to do what they're going to do. But the real point there is that at this point, cloud isn't just about whether you have a cloud offering, but whether you have a strong cloud migration process that is proven and has led to hundreds of migrations. That's where the real news is. Second of all, from a natural language answer perspective, honestly, that's not a super new capability as well. Just to go back to a couple companies I've already mentioned, Zoho has its Zia AI bot. Tableau has been looking at natural language. As a Salesforce company, you could include the Salesforce investments such as RelateIQ, which was about a decade ago acquired by Salesforce to help with AI. And then Tableau also bought Narrative Science in 2021. So we are talking about years and years of research being done into answers at this point. And at this point, answers or natural language usage for analytics has to include not just the ability to find new answers within your data, but also empower the end users to look at all of your data and to access new data sources, bring new data sources in while allowing that to be part of your data environment that the data analysts and data engineers can take care of in greater detail. Everything has to be both good enough for the end user to be able to access everything and good enough for IT to be able to govern everything and to allow for this growth in data sources that is happening from the combination of AI and SaaS proliferation that is happening right now. It's not an easy task, but that's the reality of where we are in the analytics world and in the data world in 2024. So I'm hoping to see more progress from Qlik in both of these areas, both in Talent Cloud and as well as Qlik Answers. But I think these announcements for right now are just kind of status quo to keep up with the market rather than announcements that really showed off superiority or market leadership at this point. Next, I noticed that there's a couple announcements in the AI area. Cohere raised $450 million to create custom LLMs, obviously with competing against the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI with their billions and billions of dollars. That's a really tough market to be in, and more billions of dollars are going to be spent there. Elon Musk just got $6 billion for his XAI company. Everybody's getting billions of dollars. So how is Cohere going to compete with $450 million? Well, they've been building custom smaller LLMs that are use-based. So their models are going to be easier to productize and to actually bring to market and translate into products. At least that's the theory. And if that's the case, then they don't have to necessarily have to be the best model from a general perspective. So they can let OpenAI and Meta and everybody else beat themselves over the head trying to be the best from a general perspective, while Cohere ends up looking at very specific use cases. But I actually felt that the more interesting AI funding announcement was much smaller. It was a $20 million funding announcement for a company called MultiOn, which was raised to potentially bridge gaps between robotic process automation and large language models. So the RPA world of UiPath, automation anywhere, that was a good bridge capability in the 2010s, but it was rules-based, it was fragile, it was prone to technical debt, and anytime you wanted to fundamentally change your processes, you had to completely rewrite your RPA. So obviously this was not a method that was going to have long legs and stay forever and ever. We needed a way to move from RPA to bots. And I think this MultiOn approach is going to be an interesting capability. Thanks a lot to Brett Kinsella for bringing up this topic on Synthedia, which is a Substack that you should definitely subscribe to. But I think that more fundamentally, we look at AI as something new and novel, but really it's another bridge. We have had a lot of these bridges in the IT world, whether we talk about big data or the beginning of SaaS. We have had these bridges every decade or so. Now we are in this generative AI bridge, which I believe is very meaningful in terms of being able to use language, natural language, to code and better access applications. And we're still figuring out the best ways to do it. But we're also going to need a bunch of bridges to get rid of all this technical debt that we have in place. And that's actually one of the big opportunities that I see for AI, the opportunity to get rid of a lot of technical debt, whether it be poorly written code, poorly written queries, and now poorly written and designed automation. So good luck to MultiOn with that. Hoping both that they succeed and that they have competitors, because if you don't have competitors, you don't have a real market at the end of the day. So with all that said, the last topic I wanted to take on, just a quick note, is an interesting report I saw from EPRI saying that AI power constraints may now be a CIO problem. So the fundamental challenge is that when you look at, say, an OpenAI ChatGPT type request and compare that to a Google search request, it takes 10 times more energy to support ChatGPT. So obviously, as GPT and other LLMs become more widespread, that power usage is going to be grow a lot. And there's three main recommendations from this paper that are going to hit the CIO office at some point. The first is around building better data center efficiency improvements and have increased flexibility. This is going to mean both improving your internal data centers as well as being able to figure out your hybrid cloud story as to what should stay internal, what should be private cloud, what should be public cloud, and being able to make all of those measurements from a power perspective. Second of all, they recommend improving coordination between data center developers and electric companies regarding power needs, timing, flexibility, electric supplies, and delivery constraints, meaning that you're going to have to be linking your infrastructure more closely and more directly to your power. This might affect some of your geographic decisions. Of course, your biggest data center decisions have already been made with this in mind, but this is probably going to have a longer tail effect on your infrastructure over time as we find more and more ways to use power more directly, and perhaps more reasons to be able to use off-grid power sources or independent power sources where we are less dependent on the grid, especially at peak times when normal end users and employees also need electricity. And speaking of, the third recommendation that they made in this paper was about modeling the 5 to 10 year grid investments to accommodate data center growth and to identify strategies for maintaining grid reliability with these large novel demands from generative AI. Of course, you have generative AI, you have your current infrastructure. It's hard to imagine that we will be using less power over time and fewer computers and devices and phones and Internet of Things and edge computing and other things like that. So we are going to have to figure out how to support some of these perhaps edge use cases from a power and infrastructure perspective. And I expect that's going to end up in the CIO's hands as almost every sort of metering-based approach to using tech has ultimately come down to an engineer or an architect in the IT world, and then have that information spread out to finance and accounting and other business use cases, but other business departments. I think the CIO is going to own this one over time. So there's some food for thought. A lot of big questions being asked by events over the past week. And frankly, there are going to be more. So I didn't say this at the beginning of the show, but I'm actually in New York City for NetApp's Analyst Day. And at the same time, we've got Databricks Data and AI Summit going on in San Francisco, where I expect one or two things will probably be announced. So we will catch you up on that next week, as well as the big questions that are affecting the CIO office. Thank you so much for joining this special solo show. I'm looking forward to having Charlie back next week. But if you're seeing this on YouTube, please like, please subscribe, please comment. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you and to take on your questions and help be your voice as I'm talking to all these people at all these shows. Thanks a lot and see you next week.